welcome to episode 2 of Double D, the Davenport brothers strike back
in the house.
Right.
Actually, in the exact same spots we were in before.
It's true, in the same clothes too. Jeremy Kent Jackson, I'm Hal Sparks, of course, when we play Douglas and Donald Davenport, and we were talking a little bit. We started getting into this conversation because you teach kids acting.
That's right.
You run a camp. Tell me about the camp and explain it to anybody who doesn't know. And I'll put links in the down below of how to get information on all that stuff. But explain to me, like, because you do a summer camp, you do a year-round thing. What's it called? What's it about?
Well, about 10 years ago, a partner of mine and I, who's a big voiceover actor, he was one of the Ninja Turtles for a little while, and he was actually the promotional voice of Disney XD for 5 or 6 years.
So a thespian.
Yeah, so he was the guy going, next up on Disney XD.
Right.
So anyway, about 10 years ago, we started a little company called Discovery on Stage, and we did that in an effort to, really get outside of ourselves as actors and back into the classroom. Give back a little bit, integrate with some young energy, and share our craft and our trade with young folks. So we started a summer acting camp out in Monrovia, California. We did our first 5 years there, and then brought it over to Burbank, a little bit closer as it grew.
Right, Burbank, Television City, as many people know it, and really the essence of the Tonight Show was there for years. When you move to LA to be an actor. Burbank is oftentimes the first situation. That's why I lived on Kling Street in Burbank when I first moved out here in an apartment, because I was like, I'm going to be close to the studios.
You want to be nearby.
Yes, as if commuting is going to be your biggest problem.
That's right.
To work.
Or as if they're going to invite you to jump over the fence.
Yeah,
because you're a neighbor.
Right, it's the silliest thing. But it's because Burbank...
you live close? We'll put you in the show.
Yeah, Burbank is Warner Brothers. It's the Disney big studio is there. There's... Paramount has a side lot.
Nickelodeon's there.
Right. You're not far from CBS Radford, where many of your favorite sitcoms are filmed.
That's right.
So you're so you set it up in Burbank.
We set it up in Burbank in partnership with this school called Providence High School, which is a really neat place, full of lots of visual and performing arts programming. They actually hired our company to provide the theater education programming throughout the year as well. So we serve high school students through that program, and then we have sort of afternoon, evening classes for all ages, up through adults. Actually, we teach a lot of like leadership workshops using theater training to help adults develop their skills as well. And then we have our summer camp, which is really cool. This year we're going to host about 120 kids. And they do like stage combat with sword fighting. They do movement, dance. They do singing, songwriting. They do, of course, do acting and improv.
Yeah, because you guys put a show together from scratch.
That's right. Our byline is from the imagination up, and what we're trying to do is engage the students in the whole entire creative process, really giving them ownership over the final product. So they create their own characters, storylines. We guide them through the process of crafting a script. They write original songs, and they choreograph their fights and their dances themselves. There's film projects and visual art components as well. So it's really a great time. We never know what we're going to end up with at the end, but it's super fun. The kids integrate with industry professionals. All of our teachers are working actors. We've got all kinds of great stuff going on for us.
That's awesome. Yeah. So tonally. I've often said that sitcoms are musicals without the songs.
That's kind of true.
Like, especially, from Big Bang Theory to, all the sort of modern, even Friends and whatnot. Yeah. There's a tonal element of the acting that is heightened reality. It's not 100% real ever. Right. And part of it is you're waiting for a laugh, you're doing all that. And we definitely have that as a part of this show. That's definitely one of those things where you are filling the gaps that is just filled by laughter as an actor. Right. And I think only maybe soap acting is weird.
Right. It's strange. And it's interesting that you bring up musicals, because to me, really all of the scripts that I encounter, be it dramatic or comedic, but especially comedic, there's a rhythmic quality to the.
Well, Mel Brooks was a drummer initially. He was a jazz drummer, and he credits that with a lot of how he births his timing.
Yeah, and I think there's a rhythm to the jokes, to the comedy.
Right.
There's a rhythm to when the dramatic beats kind of cruise in and out. And that's how I always hear it in my head. Is almost like music. You know, there's highs and lows. There's middle tones.
And sometimes there's that surprise beat that you have to throw in that only works because the timing is off from everything else that's going on. As a matter of fact, there might be a meter to what's going on and how everybody is talking in a kind of mechanical sense, artistically, like everybody's just doing the scene and speaking like normal human beings, and then bang, a piece of information comes in. That's the joke.
Exactly.
And so it has to be off tempo for that surprise, for that additional beat. Other ones have to match exactly the tempo of the talking. Everybody's kind of, you just got to keep in with the conversation. You don't overplay it.
Right.
You don't bring the acting up.
Right.
You just the fact that you're keeping it on the same measure with everything else, but the words you're actually saying are so bizarre or offbeat,
right,
that's where the joke lies. Right.
And oftentimes, I think as an actor too, what you have to be aware of as you're approaching the material is that you have a bunch of different jobs in a scene or a script in its entirety, and one of those jobs is to be the guy who delivers that punchline or that joke. You need to know and understand when you're that guy or that gal. But also, there's at times you're going to be the setup person, the person who's leading up to that, and so you got to be really aware of what your function is. I think in any given scene or any given moment.
And a good script, and oftentimes on our show. Second device. I literally ran out of space on this on my iPod Touch where I was filming, so now we're on my phone. So hopefully I won't get any more calls. Okay, so where we were was the tone of acting. So let's pick up from where we were in regard to sometimes, and we'll recap a little bit. Sometimes there's a measured tempo of everybody speaking that's very natural. And then the joke comes from some person speaking in an unnatural rhythm against what's going on. You know, that's kind of like they're the high point, like hello, in the middle of it, breaks where everybody is. Right. And that gets a laugh simply because it breaks the tempo.
Breaks the rhythm, yeah.
And in other circumstances, the tempo is moving along nicely, and you don't interrupt the tempo to do the joke. It's the words themselves that are obtuse, don't fit the circumstance, and therefore if you keep them the same rhythm as everybody else is speaking and you say them very naturally, they're much funnier because they stand out. Now this is kind of rudimentary, but in acting in a show like this, we find ourselves quite frequently, when you were saying being sometimes you're the straight man, sometimes you're the joker. Yeah. And you and I vacillate between the two, and we have a scene, and we can't really talk about it, what the scene itself was. But recently we had one where we had a good stretch where we were swapping who was to blame. It was an argument-based scene, and the rest of the scene would carry on, and we would always pop back into that argument. And sometimes I would start it, and sometimes you would start it. It was really funny and a lot of fun to do.
And see, that to me, to interject, that to me is less about a punchline and more about a relationship. And that's another thing that's really cool, I think, about Lab Rats in particular, is our writers have taken good care of our characters in that they've really intertwined them into, complicated and I think relatable relationships. And so we are swapping punchlines, but more than that, we're revealing relationships and history and backstory and all that kind of stuff that I think brothers probably all over the world can relate to, right? Guys out
even
there.
Ones that were just accidentally born on the same day.
That's right.
In different
who aren't
years
actually
and times.
Brothers, but maybe are. We don't know.
I think kind of are.
Maybe
kind of are.
A little bit.
Kind of are. That's awesome. Okay, so, and the other thing is, most of the time when you're on a sitcom, this is what this is. With all the adventure and everything else that's going on, at our root base, this show is a situation comedy. The situation is exaggerated, it is extraordinary because we have bionic children and superhero kind of activities. Yeah. But at its root, the point of it is the jokes about that stuff. It's a spoof-based show of that particular thing.
We want to make people laugh.
Yeah, exactly. So at any time, even in the most dramatic moment or the most exciting moment, we always have time for a joke.
And you know what I call that?
What?
That's called pressure release.
Yes, right.
So and this happens even in the best dramas, you'll notice. Pay attention when you're watching a drama. A good one, it'll just take longer than in our show. Because our show, you can't get much past a half a page before we got to have a pressure release, a reminder of where we're at. And we're in a comedy.
That's
we're in a comedy, ultimately. But even in a drama, things get too tight, too wound up. There's going to be a little release of pressure, a little opportunity for the audience to relax, have a laugh, a moment, so that they can kind of re-engage.
Well, those are the
people need that break.
They have to. Well, in real life, I think it's said that you can only really maintain an emotion for 17 seconds unless you make an active choice to do so. Meaning that if you're angry, technically speaking, your brain can only be angry for 17 seconds before it tries to turn it into something else.
Sure.
We have to do something about this. We have to solve this, or it transmutes into, I'm angry, but I can't do anything about it, so it goes to sadness. I'm angry, but I can do something about it, it goes to happiness. Like, I think I've got it.
Yeah.
And it only takes your brain 17 seconds to do that.
Makes a lot of sense.
And so naturally, that's why there's a tendency to like laugh after a long period of crying, while your own body will do that and stuff. But as an actor, you have to maintain for these scenes, because it's not about your emoting, it's really about the audience emoting and catching them up in it. So you could drag an emotion out to an unnatural length when you're doing a show. That's what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Dragging laughter longer than it normally does in human life, and sadness and anger and everything. So at some point, you gotta cut it. On a lot of drama shows, quite frankly, it just happens at commercial.
Yeah, that's right. That's true.
They just leave.
Yeah.
Okay, take 3 minutes. Here's a bear dancing, talking about toilet paper. Chill out for a second, and then come back to us.
Get your popcorn.
Right.
Take a deep breath.
Go to the bathroom. Come back. Ours, we use jokes.
Yep.
So you kind of have to always. You can't be that actor in this circumstance. You have to be able to infuse those jokes with some reality, but you can't be like, my character would never say that. Because this is an environment where no character would ever say that in real life. But these characters would say that, like no character in a musical. In real life, no one would break into an entire song.
That's right.
And
generally speaking.
Yeah, right.
That's true.
I've done it. But most people don't.
I did it in the car on the way over.
Yeah.
But I was feeling like a lot of emotion at the time. Which is why people break into song and musicals.
That's right.
It's usually an emotional peak.
Yes.
As a side note.
Yeah. That being said, so tonally, there's we really focus on rhythm, and we really focus on breaking the rhythm or sustaining the rhythm, depending on that. And then within that, as far as that timing goes, when you can feel how the energy of the joke goes, and it's not something you mechanically have to do. If you try to do it, it comes across as ham-handed. Yeah, it's got to be something you infuse, and that's what
they say. Oh, he's got great timing, or she's got great timing.
Yeah,
that's what it is. But it's something that can be cultivated, I think, too.
Well, I think the way you learn it, quite frankly, and the way I learned it, and the way almost every comedian I've ever heard of, or a comedic actor learns it, is by imitating the timing in movies. It's why the movie quoters end up being great actors at some point, because they got, or they, in the case of, the Marlon Brandos of the world and the Pacinos of the world, they went and saw plays and were so impacted by them that they literally played over the performance in their head. So whether they're voicing it or not, the timing and the energy of the emotion and all that stuff was going on.
Well, and that goes hand in hand with usually where I start with my acting classes. Right. So we talk about, first and foremost, the most important thing for an actor is awareness. Yeah. It's self-awareness, and it's awareness of the world around you. Yeah. And so, what you're talking about when you're observing other performers, successful, wonderful performers on television, movies, on stage, whatever it may be, you're just being aware of not just being entertained, but what are the mechanics behind it. So that's just awareness. You're just picking up on the details behind it. And then, in turn, you really have to start with awareness of self. What are your tools? What are you presenting? What rhythms do you have? What posture do you have physically, vocally, emotionally? What are your habits? So, you really got to build self-awareness and then awareness of the world around you. If you have those two things, I really believe just about anybody that you got the will to do. Just about anybody can get there.
I agree. I think also the key for me is a lot of people tend to think people are magically talented. And no matter who it is, I don't care who you think is magically talented, they worked at it at a time when nobody else was working on it. Most of the time it's because they started very young. Like we look at kids who can play the drums really well when they're 8, or kids who can do all this kind of stuff, or YouTube stars who are like 13 or whatever. Yeah. But they've been doing it for 4 years. That's right. They started when they were 9. Right. There's an element of, was it really talent, or did they just fall in love with it so thoroughly that when the tough parts of it came, and they will come, there are parts of it that are just hard to learn,
the wall you pound your head against.
Yeah. And then eventually you'll move past it. Yep. But most people, I think, give up because they're not as in love with it as the person who we think of as talented. I think talent is just falling in love with what you want to do earlier than everybody else.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
And I've always thought that whatever you want to do, whether you want to act or dance, write music, be a business person, whatever it is, be a math whiz, science, whatever it is, the third year is always terrible. The third year of doing it is always terrible because you're no longer new at it, and you've got, you plateaued maybe a little bit, and the next step is much more subtle. It's not you're not doing this incremental growth that you can note, and it's frustrating. It's very frustrating. Yeah. And I think most people give up around year 3. That's why we're a country full of yellow belts.
Yeah, right.
But I think the essence is that most of the time when you're younger, especially, quite frankly, everything stinks. Like life is just rough when you're a teenager and stuff. It's just school's hard, relationships are hard, parental relationships are hard, and all that stuff. So you don't take it out on the fact that the piano is tough. You don't blame the piano. Right. You just keep practicing, and it becomes your thing. So magically, when you're 18, you're this incredible songwriter because you've been doing it for 10 years.
Well, as they say, I can't remember who said this, but I love this quote.
It's probably me.
It's probably Hal. It might be you, actually.
Yeah.
You say a lot of things.
Thanks.
That I think,
I do.
it really amazed me. You may have said this, really. And then you probably took it from somebody else. I don't know. Anyway, nobody who's great at anything didn't stink first.
Yeah.
Great quote.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other one that I use a lot in my acting classes is, that definition of talent that you're talking about, which I really love. This comes from a little workbook, which is a great one for all you young actors out there. It's called A Practical Handbook for the Actor. It's about that thick, which I like. I like skinny books with pictures in them.
Right, and crayons attached. And a little
so great
plastic thing in the cover.
And you can unfold it and turn it into a placemat.
Oh, yeah.
So you can put your grilled cheese
my
on
acting,
top of it.
Yeah, I had a pop-up acting book. You did? Yeah, I had Uta Hagen's pop-up book.
Oh, I love that one.
Yeah,
great edition. Did you get the acrylic edition?
I did. I had to. But it's not for kids.
No, it isn't. Anyway, Practical Handbook for the Actor defines talent in this way, which I love because I don't love starting an acting class, and a lot of the kids who come in say, "Oh, who's the most talented one in your class?" And I just don't like the idea that we might be born with something that somebody else isn't born with.
No. And
so this definition kind of takes care of that. Talent is 3 things. It's will. How bad do you want it? Bravery. How powerful are your guts? Like, what risks are you willing to take in order to achieve your goal?
And a lot of times in acting, that can strictly be guided by how little shame do you have about what you want to do and what your dream is. Because most people are easily shamed. That's why a lot of acting exercises when you start out, like acting like a tree or picking an animal and stuff, is not really about infusing that, but about getting over your embarrassment in public. Because
you're going to be asked to do all kinds of crazy stuff. So you have to be brave, and then you also have to be brave on the way to getting the job. You're gonna be rejected. You're gonna be criticized. You're gonna have critics telling you you're no good. So you have to be brave enough to get back up and push it aside and move forward.
Right.
And if you're willful, that's the first part. You will do that. You got to be brave. You got to have some guts. And then the third one is common sense, and that's a really interesting one because common sense in these terms. I know. We're not talking about basic intelligence. We're talking about common sense, the universal intelligence. So you need to understand what it is to be human. And that gets into that awareness, self-awareness, and awareness of others thing. You have to be able to pick up on, empathize, and sympathize with those around you.
Social and emotional cues from human beings. And know, like, be able to go empathize. Being able to, that act of empathy is super helpful. Because you have to go, if I was in that same situation, how would I... That's why I've never, as an actor, I've never needed to, like, listen to a song to cry or those kind of things. If the script is really good, especially. But if it's usually on the page. You can find what you need on the page.
Well, it's really interesting because I honestly accredit that to the reason I'm still on this show. Because when I got Douglas in my scripts... what I read off the page was, oh, this is the bad guy. Because there really wasn't much about him that was too redeeming in those first few episodes.
That's right.
But if you ask yourself some important questions as an actor when approaching a character, I always think to myself, well, why? Why is he acting this way? What came before that is informing his decision-making process? And so what happened for me is I approached our relationship. I'm like, well, there's a reason he's pushing back against his brother. And what that does is, if you approach the character with empathy, no matter how despicable their choices might be, somebody out there is going to connect to it. Most importantly, you're going to be able to connect to it, and you're going to have a little empathy for the character you're playing, even again, if their choices are despicable.
Yeah, even if they're like, we got to get rid of this guy and he is a bad person, but I understand how he got there.
Yeah, how he got
Which is much more interesting to watch anyways. I mean, that's really what we're talking about.
And P.S., a great way to approach life.
Yeah.
Is to observe what's happening around you, and you may not be a fan of this person or that, but at least you can put yourself on the other side and go, okay, I understand why. And when you understand why, you all of a sudden are empowered to engage the world in a different kind of way, I think.
That's right. Awesome. Yeah. Well, it's a great start, and it's a great way of looking at, if you're interested in acting on shows like Lab Rats and those kind of things, we'll try and give you, we're going to do a couple more of these eventually that kind of give you an insight on how to do it mechanically. Actually, what it takes to get the audition and get all that stuff is kind of an immaterial aspect. That's not something you and I have any control over. But what we can impart is what it's like to be on set, do that kind of work, and be an actor and deliver from the point of view of somebody who's actually doing it here. So we'll try and do that a little bit for you. But thanks for joining us. And Jeremy Kent Jackson, always awesome.
Hal Sparks, always awesome as well.
See you later.
See you next time.
And all the links both to the book and to his program and all that stuff will be below you in the comments, above the comment section. And I'm also going to, I'll include some other info that we talked about in there as well. So, all right. Now we get to enjoy our coffee that we got from the lovely French man who runs the little cafe.
The little cafe. I didn't even know about it. He told me about it.
I told him about it today. That was
Whatever.
Isn't that
tasty.
Nice? That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.